Good afternoon everyone. So today is the last lecture on baseband communication. So I'm going to cover some of the remaining topics. So what we have seen so far is we have seen about linear modulation. So the linear modulation expression is right here. Okay. So basically what we do is we have a sequence of information symbols and we multiply the delayed pulses with these symbols and then transmit. Okay. So because of this multiplication, basically what we are actually changing is we are changing something called amplitude of the pulse as well as phase of the phase, because we are allowing complex numbers for B of n, right. In terms of QPSK, we allow the symbols to take complex values. So the complex numbers have both magnitude and phase. So basically we are changing the magnitude of the pulse and phase of the pulse by multiplying with this symbol B of n. So both magnitude and phase are changing the magnitude and phase are both linear operations. So okay, so they are linear. So this is why this is a linear modulation. So next thing what we are going to look at is something called non-linear modulation, where depending on the information, depending on the bit value or something, we change the frequency. Okay, so changing the amplitude and phase are linear, while changing the frequency is non-linear operation. So that is the basic idea behind non-linear modulation. Okay, so we will start with that, and then we will introduce another thing called modulation with memory. Okay, so far we have been mapping the symbols based on the bits directly. Now we will make the mapping dependent on time. Okay, so we will introduce some memory in the system, so it has some usefulness. We will see that also. This is called differential encoding, and this is like introducing some kind of memory in the system to overcome some of the problems the receiver might face. So today we are going to look at nonlinear modulation and then differential modulation, and then finally how do we compare the performance of all these different techniques. Okay, so each modulation technique has some advantages, also has some so that is the reason why we are considering many different techniques. Okay, so if one technique is better than all the remaining things, then we will just consider that technique alone, right? But it is not the case. So linear modulation has some advantages and disadvantages, while nonlinear modulation also has some advantages and disadvantages. So we will have to see and compare them in a fair manner. Okay, so that is what I will conclude with, how efficient these modulation techniques are in terms of using power and bandwidth. Okay, so that is the last topic. With that, we will conclude this session on baseband communication. Okay, again as before, we will continue with the topic. So we will start with this nonlinear modulation, and it is frequency shift keying is one example of nonlinear modulation. Okay, because when you change the frequency depending on the bit value, it is actually a nonlinear operation. Okay, while changing the phase and amplitude are linear. Okay, so that is why frequency shift keying is called nonlinear modulation, and the idea is very simple. Okay, so what you do is you just like linear modulation, you have a constellation of size m. Okay, so you have 16-com constellation where the size is 16. You have QPSK with size 4. So you have a constellation of size m in linear modulation. So similarly for nonlinear modulation, you also have some constellation. You can imagine it's like a constellation of size m. So there are m points in your constellation, and each point is now represented using a unique frequency. Okay, so for instance, you have in this particular example, so I am considering this constellation with size 4, so 4 FSK. Okay, so this is called 4 FSK, and we have 4 frequencies F1, F2, F3, and depending on the bit value, so you will send one of these frequencies. Okay, so for instance, in this particular example, if the bit value is 0, 0, I mean, if 2 bits you take, basically you 2 bits you take and map it to one symbol. So if the 2 bits are 0, 0, you send the first frequency F1. If the 2 bits are 0, 1, you send F2, 1, 1 and 1, 0, F4. So you can indirectly think that there are 4 symbols and each symbol is assigned a unique frequency, and each symbol gets mapped to unique bits. Okay, so in this case you have 4 FSK, so you will have 2 bits mapping each symbol, right? So this is the simple idea. Again, the symbol rate and symbol duration again comes into the picture. So how much duration you take to send this symbol is basically symbol duration, and then the inverse of the symbol duration is your symbol rate. Okay, so that is at the rate you are sending the symbols, right? So now, so it means, so when you say symbol duration is t seconds, it means you send this cosine waveform of a particular frequency for t seconds, and then for the next t seconds you will send the next symbol value, right, based on the next next pair of bits. Okay, so for instance, okay, so I am illustrating that with an example. Okay, so suppose you have this bit sequence to transmit 0 1 0 0 1 1 0 0. Okay, so that is the bits sequence I am transmitting. So this 0 1 bit is first set of 2 bits, right? So 0 1, if the bits are 0 1, I will send frequency f2, right? So that is what I will do. So first t seconds I will send a frequency f2, okay, a cosine waveform of frequency f2, and the next 2, now after t seconds I look at the next pair of bits, it is 0 0, right? So 0 0 corresponds to frequency f1. So I will send the cosine waveform of frequency f1 in the next t seconds. Similarly, after that I will look at the next 2 bits, which is 1 1. So 1 1 frequency f3. So this is how I send. Okay, so I will have a cosine waveform for a duration of time t seconds. The frequency of the cosine waveform is chosen based on the bit pair value at that duration, right? So at that sequence basically. So now I can write an expression this waveform in a mathematical manner. So it is easy to draw the picture, right? So every t seconds you have a cosine waveform with frequency depending on the corresponding pair of bits, right? So this is drawing the picture is easy. So now let us write the mathematical expression for this. Okay. So let us say f of n be the frequency which gets mapped to the nth bit pair. Okay, so f of 1 is basically first 2 bits you take and then see what is the frequency associated with those 2 bits, and then that is f of 1. F of 2 is basically you take the next 2 bits and see what is the frequency associated with it. So this is f of, so this is the frequency as a function of the bit, right? So f of n is basically the frequency corresponding to nth bit pair, because now you have 4 FSK, you can send 2 bits, right? So you can send 2 bits in each symbol duration. Okay. So now f of n is basically the frequency mapped corresponding to the nth pair of bits. So now again, so basically what happens is you are not sending the cosine waveform for minus infinity to infinity, but you are sending it only for a duration of t seconds, right? So there is inherently multiplication with some windowing function. So you are actually multiplying this cosine waveform with a window which exists only for t second duration. So you can think of this as pulse. So let's say you consider this rectangular pulse which is existing only for t seconds duration with height 1. So what you can see is that, so multiplying, it's equivalent to, so suppose this portion for instance is obtained by multiplying the cosine waveform with this pulse p of t. Now this portion is obtained by multiplying the cosine waveform with the pulse delayed by t seconds. Okay, so mathematically this is what is happening. So that is what is written here, right? So each segment, so for instance this segment of waveform is obtained by multiplying that cosine waveform of this frequency f1 with the pulse delayed by 1t, 2t, 3 seconds, right? So this is basically, so this is how you are obtaining the modulated waveform. So this is basically like the multiplication with delayed pulses is also happening here also. Okay, so that linear modulation expression we have, it has some nice connections here also, except that now instead of multiplying the delayed pulses with complex symbols, we are actually multiplying with cosine waveforms. Okay, the cosine waveforms frequency depends on corresponding bit value, the corresponding bits you map to get that symbol, right? So here also one important remark is that delayed pulses appear here also, and then so whenever you have delayed pulses, you don't want ISI, right? I mean at the same time you want the bandwidth occupied your modulated waveform to be small and compact, right? So let me remark that. So whenever you are basically this is also multiplying some waveform with delayed pulses, right? So the role of raised cosine pulse, the role of rectangular pulse, the role of sinc pulse, all the things which we talked about earlier regarding linear modulation, they are applicable here also. Like the pulse shaping works here also. So instead of choosing a rectangular pulse like this, you might choose a much more bandwidth efficient pulse like a raised cosine pulse or something here also. Okay, so that is one important remark. But nevertheless, now let us look at another important question. How should we choose the frequencies, right? Because you have to choose 4 frequencies here, F1, F2, F3 and F4, and remember that you have only t seconds to transmit the waveform, right, to indicate the current bit value or a sequence of bits value. So for instance, within this t seconds, you have to, by looking at this modulated waveform, you should be able to decide whether it is F2 or F1 or F3 or F4, and depending on that you will be able to infer the symbol value, and depending on that you will be able to get the bit value, right. So you need to choose the frequency so that they can be easily differentiated in this within this second within this duration of t seconds. Okay, so we need to be able to so for instance, if these frequencies are very close by, okay, so if one of them is 100 hertz, the other one is 101 hertz, 102 hertz, 103 hertz, they are all very close by, then it may be difficult to differentiate them, say for instance in 1 millisecond. So your time duration, symbol duration is 1 millisecond, but if you have a frequencies 100, 101, 102 and 103 as 4 different frequencies, then they may not be able to differentiable in this particular duration of 1 millisecond, right? The symbol duration is only t seconds. So within t seconds you should be able to differentiate clearly these 4 frequencies so that the receiver can look at this waveform and then understand what frequency it is, right? So there is this problem of differentiating these frequencies. When you have multiple different 4 frequencies, you should be able to differentiate them within this t seconds, right? So that is what we will look at now. So what I am going to show you is that there should be a way of differentiating them within t seconds. Okay, so let me go back to this notes. Okay, so this is M-array frequencies, right? So let us say these are the M frequencies I am using: FC, FC plus delta F, and so on, FC plus 2 delta F. Delta F is the spacing between the frequencies. Okay, so delta F is the spacing between the frequencies I chose. So for instance, if you have 4 frequencies, F1, F2, F3, F4, you can choose F1 as the carrier frequency FC, F2 as FC plus this separated by a spacing of delta F, third frequency will be FC plus 2 delta F, and then the fourth frequency will be FC plus 3 delta F. Okay, so you have the spacing of delta F between these frequencies. Now the question is, what should be the spacing delta F so that these frequencies are clearly distinguishable in this duration of t seconds, because that is the duration in which you are sending the symbol. The next duration, next t seconds, you will send the next symbol, right? So within t seconds you should be identifying which of these frequencies was sent, right? So now So the one important criterion we use is we want the chosen frequencies to be orthogonal in this duration of t seconds. So orthogonal essentially means I multiply these two cosine waveforms of two different frequencies and integrate the product this duration of t seconds, then the integrated product has to become 0. Okay, so that is the definition for orthogonality. Now we have m frequencies and we want to choose these frequencies so that they can be easily distinguishable in this t seconds, right? So now what we can do is that we can define a criterion. So we want these frequencies fc plus delta f, fc plus 2 delta f, they should be orthogonal in the symbol duration. Okay, so let me explain what is the meaning of this orthogonality. So basically orthogonality essentially means, so let's say x of t and y of t are orthogonal if this integral is 0. So x of t multiply with y conjugate of t dt. Okay, so star is basically conjugation. Okay, so it essentially means these two signals are perpendicular to each other in some sense, in some geometrical notion. So when you have this kind of orthogonality, it guarantees a good between the signals. Okay, so for instance, if x and y are orthogonal, then it means they are well separated, in the sense the distance between these two signals will be sufficiently large. Okay, so that is what it means. Okay, so you can actually talk about signals as if they are actually points in some space, points in some Euclidean space or something. So orthogonality is going to be very useful for us. Okay, so now, so we want these frequencies to be orthogonal. So essentially it means I look at the kth frequency, which is fc plus k delta f, and I can represent it in an equivalent domain. So cosine is basically the real part of e power j 2 pi f f, right? So basically e power j theta is cos theta plus j sin theta. So there is a connection between the complex exponential and the corresponding cosine waveform, right? So let me say this is the complex exponential related to this fc. fc is common to all these frequencies, right? You have fc plus delta f, fc plus 2 delta f, fc is basically common. So I remove that fc and look at these different cosine waveform. So first cosine waveform will have delta f frequency, second waveform will have 2 delta f and so on, right? So fc is common, so I remove that fc. So I am defining complex exponentials because they are also related to cosine waveforms. So now I am defining a complex exponential with frequency k delta f. So where k can be running from 0 to m minus 1, right? So these are the equivalent complex exponential I have. Now I want the inner product two cosine waveforms to be 0. Okay, so there is, you can do some algebra and then show that the inner product between two cosine waveforms is nothing but half times the real product of inner product between these complex waveforms, right? So you have cosine waveforms here, right? So cos 2 pi fc plus k delta f for k running from 1 to m or 0 to m minus 1. So you have m cosine waveforms. There is a corresponding equivalent complex exponential waveforms e power j 2 pi k delta f t. So the inner product between the cosine waveforms can be written in terms of the inner product between the complex exponentials. So the relationship is this. Okay, so the inner product between the cosine waveforms and corresponding complex exponentials is written in this way. All I had to do was compute the inner product between the complex exponentials and then take the real part, that will be the inner product between cosine wave. So we want the inner product to be 0. So it means the real part of the inner product between complex exponentials, that has to be 0, right? So now let us look at that particular condition. Okay. So now the complex, again everything is defined over only t seconds, right? So the next t, so the waveforms are now restricted to t seconds. So now I multiply e power j k delta f t and e power j 2 pi L delta f t, that is two complex exponentials with one with frequency k delta f and one with L delta f. So we want these to be orthogonal. So we want to, so I am assuming L equal to or k equal to L plus 1. So they are, so that they are the closest ones. So k delta f and k plus delta 1 delta f, they are the closest frequencies. We want them to be orthogonal. So now let us see what the spacing should be. Okay. So you can compute this inner product between e power j 2 pi k delta f t and then e power j 2 pi k plus 1 delta f t, and then take the real part. So when I take the real part, this is what I get. So sine 2 pi delta f t divided by 2 pi delta f integrate over the duration 0 to t seconds, that should be 0. It means that the spacing delta f should be half the symbol rate. So 1 by t is the symbol rate. The spacing between the frequencies should be 1 by 2 times the symbol rate. So this is the minimum frequency spacing needed between these frequencies you choose for frequency shift keying. The spacing should be such 2 times t so that these frequencies are orthogonal. So you have to space them at fc plus 1 by 2t, fc plus 2 times 1 by 2t and so on. So the spacing should be 1 by 2t. So this is important result. So when you have orthogonality, it is nicer. Okay, so they will be able to, you will be able to distinguish them nicely in the receiver. What we have assumed is that one important assumption we have made is that all these cosine waveforms have the same phase. For instance, if I go back and look at this cosine waveform, they all have different frequencies, but the phase is 0. So cos 2 pi fc plus k delta f t, where k delta f changes, but phase remains same. So all the frequencies have the same 0 phase. So in this particular case, so all the waveforms have identical phase. So this is called coherent orthogonality condition because all the cosine waveforms have same phase. Okay, but in reality, the cosine waveforms may have phases because you are sending the cosine waveform across the channel and then it reaches the receiver after some delay, right? Because it is not, the signal has to propagate through the physical medium, so it will reach the receiver only after certain delay. And when there is a delay, the cosine waveform gets phase shift because when you delay in time domain, you get phase shift in the frequency domain. So the cosine waveforms, after some delay, they will have different phase shifts. So if you delay the cos 2 pi f1t by tau and cos 2 pi f2t by same tau, the phase shifts for these frequencies will be different. So the frequency f1 will have some phase shift, f2 will have different phase shift, even though the delay is the same. So that is an important problem, right? Because once the propagation delay happens, the phase of these waveforms changes. So now you want the signals to be even when they have different phases. Okay, so for instance, you consider only two waveforms, one with frequency fc and one with frequency fc plus delta f, but they have two different phases. One has phase theta, the other one has phase phi. Okay, so irrespective of value of theta and phi, we want these signals to be orthogonal. Okay, so this is called non-coherent scenario, and then we can impose the constraint that these two signals have to be orthogonal irrespective of the value of theta and phi. So procedure, you can derive the orthogonality condition in this case also. It will be, so this is a much stronger orthogonality condition. Okay, so this is a much stronger orthogonality condition. So irrespective of value of theta and phi, the cosine waveforms have to be orthogonal. So now you can go through the derivation which is similar to what we had before. So only thing is, now we will finally end up with the answer saying that the spacing should be 1 by t. So instead of 1 by 2t, now the spacing should be 1 by t. So this is called non-coherent orthogonality condition. So when you have all the cosine waveforms having identical phase, the separation between them should be 1 by 2t for them to be orthogonal. Now when you have frequencies cosine waveforms which may have different phases, then the frequency separation should be 1 by t for them to be orthogonal to each other. So this is called non-coherent orthogonality conditions. So these are important results in, and when you design when you choose the frequencies for FSK, frequency shift keying, it is desirable to choose them to be orthogonal based on these requirements. So you should space them sufficiently so that they are easily distinguishable at the receiver, right? Okay. Okay, so this is about nonlinear modulation, which is a frequency shift keying, and frequency shift keying is also very widely used technique. Okay, just like QPSK, QAM and BPSK signaling, FSK is also used by many standards, and many communication equipments, communication things use FSK schemes, digital communication, right? So it is also useful. So towards the end of this lecture, I will derive some results on how to compare these different schemes. PSK, you have BPSK, QPSK, QAM, and then there is FSK. So is there a way to compare their advantages and disadvantages in a common framework? So that is what we will see towards the end of this lecture. But now let us move on and see something called modulation with memory. So what do we mean by modulation with memory? So it means that the symbol we are currently sending depends not only on the current bit value, but also on the previous symbols we have sent. Okay. So why do we need such a memory? Okay. So the memory we introduce is actually in a controlled manner. Okay. So we are choosing the current symbol based on the current bit value and also based on the previously sent symbols in a very clever manner, in a very controlled manner, so that some of the operations at the receiver becomes easier. Okay. So differential, what I am going to discuss now is called something called differential encoding techniques. Okay. So what is the advantage of this is I will explain that in more detail when I talk about how the receiver will work for this particular technique. Okay. So the main idea is the QPSK, the phase shift keying techniques. Okay. So QPSK, QAM and so on, BPSK, they convey the information through the phase of the waveform. Okay. So phase of the cosine waveform is what controls, what conveys the information. Okay. So when there is +1, the cosine wave will have phase 0. When there is -1, when you are sending -1, the cosine wave will have -180 degrees as the phase. So the phase of the carrier is what is eventually conveying the information. So it is very sensitive to phase errors. So for instance, when you have a transmitter which has carrier of some phase and the receiver has a carrier with a different phase, there is a phase mismatch between the transmitter and receiver carrier. So this phase error will come into the picture in detecting the symbol. Some phase difference between transmitter carrier, that will come so that will give you an offset basically because of this phase. It will change, it will affect the final performance because the information is conveyed through the phase of the carrier. So if there is a phase, then this mismatch will produce some offset which will affect your performance. So now to counteract that, to overcome that phase mismatch between the transmitter and receiver, you do something cleverly by introducing memory in your modulation. Okay, so this is called differential phase shift keying. So that is what I am going to explain now. So okay, so suppose you have, I am going to explain the differential PSK first. Okay, so differential PSK is what I am going to discuss first. So suppose you have a sequence of bits 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, some sequence of bits I have indicated through this particular sequence. Okay, now I want to map these sequence of bits into information symbols. Okay, so since I am using BPSK, I will use 1 or -1, right? But not simply based on the current bit, but based on the previous bit also. Okay. what I will do is, if the current bit is the same as the previous bit, I will send symbol 1. Okay, so if I of n is same as I of n minus 1, then I will send bit value 1. On the other hand, if the current bit is different from the previous bit, okay, then I will send symbol minus 1. So instead only the current bit, I am also looking at the previous bit and say if they are same, I will send 1, if they are different, I will send minus 1. So there is some memory in the system. Okay. So now if I go back and look at this information sequence, so there is first, so I have to initialize this at some point. Okay, so let's say I of 0 is 1, I of 1 is 1, I of 2 is 0 and so on. So now I should say what is I of minus 1, because I have to compare. First thing I have to compare with the previous one. So for instance, let us say the initialization is the first or minus 1th symbol, I of minus 1 is 1. So now the first symbol I am sending will be comparing I of 0 with I of minus 1. In this particular example, I of 0 and I of minus 1 are the same, 1, 1, right. So the bit value will be, or the symbol value will be 1. Now for the next one, I compare these two, right. So for the next one, I compare this. So they are also identical. So the next symbol is also 1. Now for the next one, I compare these two. So 1 and 0. So they are different. So I will send minus 1. Similarly, next one is also different. So 0 and 1. So I will send minus 1. So next one is 1 and 0. So this is also different. So I will send minus 1. And then finally I get 0, 0, which is same. So I get 1. So for instance, for this particular example, I will be sending 1, 1, minus 1, minus 1, minus 1 and 1. Okay, so this is the symbol. So now this is the symbol I am going to transmit. I can use linear modulation techniques. So this is now the sequence of 1s and minus 1s. I can simply multiply these sequence of symbols with delayed pulses and then I can transmit. So there is no difference in that aspect. The only difference is how do you get these symbols from the bits. That alone is the difference. Okay, so the rest of the concepts are same. So now, okay, so differential BPSK I can write in this method also. Okay, so the current symbol B of n I send now is the previous symbol times 1 if the bit is 1. Okay, and the previous symbol times minus 1 if the bit is 0. Okay, so this is one way, is another way of doing the differential encoding. Okay, so what I showed earlier is one way. So this is, okay, I didn't. So this is one way of encoding the symbol. So this is basically one way of encoding symbol. So you compare the current one and the previous one and multiply, and then depending on that, if they are same, you assign 1 or minus 1 depending on if they are same or different, right. So that is one way of thinking about differential encoding. But another way is you can also do the differential encoding in the following manner. Okay, so what you do is the current symbol you send is exactly equal to previous symbol if the bit value is 1. On the other hand, if the bit value is 0, what you send will be negative of what you sent previously. So B of n minus 1 times minus 1 if current bit value is 0, B of n minus 1 times plus 1 if the current bit is 1. Okay, so this is an alternative way of looking at the differential BPSK. Okay, so it means that, so important thing is to note that B of n depends both on the bit value 1 or 0, but it also depends on what you transmitted earlier. So the current symbol B of n depends on B of n minus 1 as well as the current bit value. Okay, so this is why there is a memory in the system, and you can extend this idea to higher order modulation techniques as well. So for instance, you can talk about QPSK, and then you can also talk about differential QPSK. So just like BPSK you had differential PPSK, you can also do the same thing with QPSK. I will show how that can be done. So this is a state transition diagram to represent the differential encoding mapping. But anyway, the same idea which we talked about earlier is applicable here also. Okay. So now in BPSK there are only two possible values for phase 1 and -1, right? In QPSK what you do is you have more possible values for phase. The phase is pi by 4 or 3 pi by 4 or minus pi by 4 or minus 3 pi by 4, right? So now you have four possible values for phases, right? In this case, so what I have done is, so this is how differential QPSK will do the mapping. So how does it do the mapping? So just like BPSK, you multiply the previous symbol with 1 or -1 depending on the bit value is 0 or 1. Now you have four possibilities now. Instead of 1 and -1, you allow 1 j -1 minus j, right? So these are the four possibilities. So the current symbol is the previous symbol b of n minus 1 multiplied with 1 if the the current bit pair is 0 0. Since now you have four possibilities for phases, you have two bits to represent each phase. So b of n will be equal to b of n minus 1 if the current bit pair is 0 0. B of n will be b of n minus 1 times j with current bit pair is 0 1. So essentially you rotate by 90 degrees. So whatever you transmitted earlier, you rotate it by 90 degrees and then transmit as the current symbol. So if the bit pair is, you multiply by -1, which is equivalent to rotating by 180 degrees, right? And then b of n minus 1 times minus j if the bit pair is 1 0. So it is equivalent to multiplying by 270 degrees. So you take the previous symbol, you rotate it by 0 degrees or 90 degrees or 180 degrees or 270 degrees depending on whether the bit pair is 0 0, 0 1, 1 1 or 1 0. So this is what differential QPSK is. So now the information is conveyed through the difference between the phases of the current symbol and the previous symbol. So b of n, the difference between b of n and b of n minus 1, the phase difference between b of n and b of n minus 1 is what conveys the information. Okay, so the information is conveyed through the difference between the phases of b of n times b of n minus 1, because b of n and b of n minus 1 will have the same phase if the bit pair is 0 0. b of n and b of n minus 1 will have a phase difference of 90 degrees if the bit pair is 0 1. b of n and b of n minus 1 will have a phase difference of 180 degrees if the bit pair is 1 1. So you have to now, the information is now encoded in the difference between the phases of b of n and b of n minus 1. So that is how the information is encoded. So this is called differential encoding. Okay, so the reason why we go for differential encoding is they are more robust to phase offsets and phase errors you have in your receiver. So I will talk about how the receiver is going to work for this particular case subsequently, and then we will see that this has some advantages when you have some phase offset between transmitter and receiver oscillators. Okay, so that is what will come next. Okay, and then finally I will do a comparison of efficiency of all these different techniques. Okay, so we have been talking about QAM, and then we have been talking about QPSK, and then we are talking about FSK. So is there a way to compare the efficiency of all these techniques in terms of power and bandwidth? Okay, so that is what we will finally conclude this session with. Right now I will take up some questions, okay, and then the rest of the lecture we will briefly focus on how the receiver can be built, how should the receiver work for these techniques. I'll just take BPSK and differential BPSK and then explain how the receiver will work for these two schemes, and then the idea for the other schemes can be are similar. Okay, so I will just explain BPSK and differential BPSK receivers and then provide an efficiency study of all these different modulation techniques. Okay, all right, I will have questions now. Okay, RCPI-TMH, you can ask your question. I have enabled the interaction.
Hello, good afternoon, sir. Sir, my question is that how the phase error is occur?
How does the error what?
How the phase error is occur? Phase angle error.
How does the phase error occur?
Yes,
Is that
sir.
the question?
Yes, sir.
the phase error essentially means, see, the oscillator at the receiver should produce an ideal cosine waveform continuously, right? So, but nothing in practice is ideal. Okay, so what you generate is not an ideal cosine waveform. It will have some deviations. It might slightly go. So suppose you want to generate build an oscillator at frequency of C. So sometimes the oscillator might slightly produce a frequency which is higher than Fc. Sometimes it produces a frequency lower than Fc. So it goes up and down. It's basically drifting. So it is not running at a constant frequency. So there is some, gradually it will go drift up and drift down and drift and so on. So that is basically practical imperfections in your oscillator circuit, because the resistance and capacitance, they change over time. They are not fixed, they are not precise. So all these things causes the oscillator to keep drifting. Okay, so that is the reason for the phase error. So because it's not producing a single cosine waveform with perfect sinusoid, right? I mean, so it keeps changing. So that is one of the reasons why we get phase errors. Okay, so when you look at some finite amount of time, so any drift your oscillator might have in that finite amount of time can be thought of as some changes to the phase. Okay, so that is basically practical imperfections in your circuits cause phase errors. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, what is the procedure to be followed for differential PSK reconstruction? That is how to recover the information from the differential phase shift key. Okay, that is the question. So I will answer that in the coming remaining portion of the lecture. Okay, I'm going to talk about that. I'll do that. So at that time it will be clear. So let us continue. Okay, so during the remaining part, what I'm going to do is briefly discuss how the receiver for BPSK and differential BPSK will work, and then that will give you some idea on how the performance of BPSK and differential BPSK works, and then we use that idea to compare how efficient these things are, whatever the phase shift keying as well as frequency shift keying. We will be able to somehow discuss the efficiency of these techniques using those ideas. Okay, so I am going to briefly describe demodulation. Again, to build the complete demodulator and to understand its performance, it is a big topic in its own. So that is why I am going to do quickly with only with BPSK and simple ideas. Okay, so what happens is in your so additive noise model. So what we will do is, so you send your modulated waveform, right? So this is your modulated waveform. And the medium adds some noise. So W of t is my noise, and what you receive is this signal which is corrupted by noise. Okay, so this is additive noise. So this is your received signal. Okay, so now let us consider, so modulated waveform, again it can be a linear modulated waveform or it can be an FSK or anything, but now let us consider the simplest case where BPSK we send only one single bit. Okay, so let us consider the simplest case, BPSK with single bit transmission. So it means I'm not transmitting a sequence of bits or a sequence of delayed pulse. I'm just sending only one bit. Okay, and then we will see how to recover that bit. Single bit transmission. So for the moment, so the modulated waveform x of t will be, I can write it as b times p of t, where b equal to 1 if bit equal to 1, 0, sorry, b equal to minus 1 if bit equal to 0. So I can write the modulated waveform as simply b times p of t, where b is either 1 or minus 1 depending on whether the bit is 1 or 0, and for the sake of simplicity I am also going to assume p of t is a nice rectangular pulse from, let's say, minus 1 by 2 to 1 by 2 with height 1, and this is basically time. Okay, so this is the pulse, which is a nice rectangular pulse, and I am going to send the symbol value multiplied by this pulse, and that is what you are sending. Okay, so now let us look at what the receiver has to do. Okay, so let's say receiver samples. So we talked about sampling the signal to get the bits, right? So we have talked about Nyquist criterion. When we talked about Nyquist criterion, we talked about sampling at exactly integer multiples of t seconds and recovering, right? So now let us say we will sample this at time t equal to 0, and then let us get this. So let's say y of t is b times pulse p of t plus your noise. Okay, so now sample at t equal to 0. Okay, so now y will be b times, when I sample the pulse t p of t at t equal to 0, the sample is 1. So I get b plus w, where y is nothing but y of t at t equal to 0, w is nothing but w of t at t equal to 0, and p of t at t equal to 0 is 1. Okay, so you can, since I am talking about simple nice rectangular pulse, I mean even if it is sync pulse it will work. I mean even if it is a Rice cosine pulse, when you sample at t equal to 0, the pulse will be non-zero. In particular, it can be, you can think of it as takes value 1, right? Now, so you have the observation, this is now your observation. So y is the symbol value b plus noise. Okay, so this is a very simple additive noise model, and then let us see how the receiver will decide based on this y. So the receiver has to look at this observation y, which is corrupted by noise, and it has to decide what is the value of b. Okay, so to do this process, to do this thing, we have to do some statistical assumption on noise. Okay, so now the simplest noise model we have is assume W to be a Gaussian noise, to be a Gaussian noise. So essentially it means that the PDF, so I mean of course we also assume that it has 0 mean. So the PDF will look like this. So this is f of the PDF of noise 1 by root 2 pi sigma e power minus 1 by 2 w square by sigma square. Okay, sigma is basically the variant, the noise, and this is how the PDF looks like. Okay, so typically this is a very commonly used model. Okay, because Gaussian because of central limit theorem, noise is actually coming from various sources. They all gets added up, and then finally the sum of the noise from various components is what you will eventually see when you sum many different noise sources, and that sum essentially looks like Gaussian. Okay, so this is from central limit theorem. So now this is a very commonly used model for noise. So with Gaussian random variable. So now let us look at the statistics of y. Okay, so when you look at y is essentially 1 plus w if bit is 1, or minus 1 plus w if bit is 0. Okay, so now you are adding a Gaussian random variable with 1 if bit is 1, if or you are adding -1 to the Gaussian random variable if bit is 0. Okay, so y is essentially a Gaussian, so y will have these statistics. So when you add 1 or -1, the mean basically shifts. Okay, so this is, let's say this is 1 and this is -1. So when you add 1 to the noise, basically the mean changes. So now this is basically the statistics of noise. Again, this is basically the same Gaussian noise with mean 1. So this is PDF of y when bit equals 1. Similarly, when bit is -1, it is going to be again the same Gaussian, but it will be centered around -1. So this is PDF of y when bit equals -1. Okay, so now, so clearly the simplest technique you can use to differentiate between 1 and 0, bit 1 and 0 is use this as the boundary. Okay, so for instance, if y is greater than 0, then the PDF of y when bit, so bit 1 PDF has higher probability. On the other hand, when y is less than 0, so your bit equal to 0. So bit equal to 0 has higher PDF. Okay, so when y is greater than 0, the observation y is greater than 0, the PDF corresponding to bit equal to 1 is higher. While on the other hand, when y is less, the PDF corresponding to bit equal to 0 is higher. So essentially this is a nice simple criterion. So what you do is, your decision rule is, or how will you detect? So the rule is, if the observation y is greater than 0, then decide that bit equals 1, greater than or equal to 0, y less than 0, then decide bit equals -1, sorry, bit equals 0. So this is a very simple idea, but it is very useful in the sense, you sample the modulated waveform at t equal to 0 and decide if the sample is positive, decide bit is 1. If the sample is negative, you decide bit is 0 because you are sending -1, right. So essentially negative side you decide 0, positive side you decide 1. So this is a very simple and useful rule, and this is what BPSK detection will look like. So you will sample the modulated waveform and then finally decide whether bit is 1 or 0 depending on whether the sign of the observation is positive or negative. Okay. Now you can always make errors. Okay, because for instance, when you are sending 1 bit equal to 1, there is also a chance that your observation is negative. Okay, so for instance in this PDF, so this is basically the region in which even though when bit is 1, your observation can become negative because you are adding a Gaussian noise. So Gaussian noise exists from -infinity to +infinity. Sometimes after noise addition, 1 plus noise might become negative. So in that case you will decide as bit equal to 0. So it is an error, right? So basically the error depends on this probability. So similarly, when you send bit equal to 0, there is a chance that the observation y is positive because there is also this region. So when you send bit equal to 0, you might end up in a negative positive value for your observation because noise might take you to the positive side, right? So there is always the chance of error, but you can compute that error using this, integrating this PDF and so on, right? So typically you can get the noise power, so signal to noise ratio, right? You can you can plot the SNR, which is signal to noise ratio. You can measure it in dB scale and you can plot the probability of error. So it looks like this. So as you change SNR, so this is 10 power minus 1, this is 10 power minus 2, 10 power minus 3 and so on, right? So as you increase your signal to noise ratio, the probability of error comes down. So it means that when the signal is of higher power, much higher power than noise, then the probability of making an error gets smaller and smaller. Okay, so as you increase the signal power or the noise power reduces, the performance, error performance improves, because basically, so essentially the distance between these symbol, okay, so the distance between 1 and minus 1 in this particular example is the one which decides how much error you will make. For instance, instead of 1 and minus 1, if I have 10 and minus 10, okay, so by making it 10 and minus 10, I am actually changing the signal power. So if I am using 1 and minus 1, it will have some power. Instead, if I am using 10 and minus 10, I will use a higher power. So when I increase the distance, clearly the error probability will come down, because I am actually looking at this particular probability of Gaussian distribution, right? But when I increase the distance between 10 and these points, then my error performance will increase or improve. Okay, so that is another important thing. Okay, so instead of sending 1 and minus 1, if I send plus 10 and minus 10, the error will be smaller for the same noise power. Okay, so essentially that is like increasing the signal power, right? So the distance between the points actually play a role in terms of error performance. So that is captured through this increase in signal to noise ratio. So if I increase the signal to noise ratio, so by changing the distance between the points, I am actually changing the signal power, and if I increase the signal power, the distance between the points increases, and then the error will also get better. Okay, so that is another important thing. Okay, now let us see what happens with differential BPSK. Okay, so we can, so again let me recall, B of n will be minus 1 times B of n minus 1 if bit equal to, in this case nth bit is 0, 1 times B of n minus 1 if nth bit equals 1. So now let us look at the corresponding observation. So y of n will be B of n times noise, and y of n minus 1 will be B of n minus 1 plus noise, the previous noise, right? So just like what we have here. So when I sent only one single bit, I'll have that corresponding bit plus noise. But now I'm sending information. Now to decode the bit, I should look at not only the current symbol but also the previous symbol. So I have to look at both, right? B of n and B of n minus 1. So I'm looking at the sample at time n and time n minus 1, okay, or n minus 1 times t seconds or n times t seconds, right? So this is what I have to look at. But one important thing is I might have some phase mismatch between transmitter and receiver. Okay, so earlier when I talked about BPSK, so I am assuming that there is no phase mismatch, okay, between transmitter and receiver. Only in that case BPSK will perform good. If there is a high phase mismatch between transmitter and receiver, BPSK will not work well. On the other hand, differential BPSK, it works even if there is some phase mismatch. Okay, so theta, we can think of it as the phase mismatch between transmitter and receiver carrier. So you can think of e power j 2 pi f ct as the carrier. So when you have e power j 2 pi f ct as your carrier and e power j 2 pi f ct plus theta as the receiver carrier. So there is a phase difference. So the transmitter carrier has 0 phase, the receiver carrier has theta phase. So the phase difference will come in to the sample. Finally, when you do the sampling and when you do the down conversion and sampling, finally there will be a phase term like this. Okay. So because of this, now this is the phase mismatch. So between the transmitter and the receiver. Okay, so there might be some phase difference, but nevertheless, when you send, the phase difference is roughly, is not going to change quickly. So it will change, it will take quite some time for it to change. So we are assuming that the phase difference at time n and time n minus 1 are roughly the same. Okay, so that is one of the assumptions. Now, if you do this product y of n times y conjugate of n minus 1, we get, so the phase difference e power j theta, when you conjugate it e power minus j theta, that product will cancel. So this will be b of n times b of n minus 1 plus w tilde of n, because you are multiplying, so w of n with e power j theta b of n minus 1 plus w tilde of n minus 1 plus some product w of n minus 1. So this is nothing but w of n times e power minus j theta times v of. Okay, so you have these phase differences. So now if I go back and look at it, right, so this will be, let me call this product as R. So b of n times b of n minus 1 will be b. Okay, so plus w tilde of n minus 1 plus w tilde of n, and this product of two noise terms is going to be very small, because Gaussian has very small chances of taking a large value, but nevertheless when you take the product is even going to be much smaller chances of having a large value. Okay, so w of n times w of n minus 1 is roughly is insignificant compared to, for instance, w tilde of n and w tilde of n minus 1. So anyway, so the important thing is b of n times b of n minus 1. If you look at it, so if I multiply b of n with b of n minus 1, I will get minus 1 if bit is 0. B of n times b of n minus 1 will be 1 if bit is 1, right? So b equals b of n times b of n minus 1, and this will be 1 if bit is 1, minus 1 if bit equals 0. So by comparing y of n with y of n minus 1, or rather multiplying y of n with y of n minus 1, conjugate of y of n minus 1, I get something, an observation which has the bit value plus of course the noise terms. Okay, so I can simply do what I did before. So decide if r is greater than 0, you decide bit equals 1. R is less than 0, decide bit equals 0. Okay, because the current bit is 1 or 0 depending on r is greater than or equal to 0 or less than 0. So similarly, you can, so basically differential demodulation is how is done here. This is how differential demodulation will work. And another thing is, this will work even when there is a phase mismatch between transmitter and receiver oscillators, while BPSK will not work well when there is phase mismatch between transmitter and receiver oscillators. Okay, so that is the main idea. Okay, so this will work. So DPSK, differential BPSK, works even if there is phase mismatch between oscillators, e power j theta. So this will conclude brief discussion about this demodulation I have given you. Now I want to be able to compare these many different techniques we have seen and say which one is better in terms of using power and bandwidth. So power and bandwidth are two important quantities. So what I am going to do now is finally talk about something called power and bandwidth efficiency of digital modulation schemes. So the remaining part of the lecture, I will focus on this particular topic where we compare how the different modulation techniques are efficient in using power and how they are efficient in using bandwidth, right? So let us say we have an M-Array modulation scheme. Okay, so let us say I have an M-Array modulation scheme. So let S1 of t, S2 of t, Sm of t be the waveforms to represent each value of the symbol. So a symbol can take m values if I have M-Array scheme, and let's say the corresponding waveform for each symbol is S1, S2, Sm. Okay, so this is a general framework. So it can, so this is applicable to whether it is you are using QAM or QPSK, or even if you are using FSK. So for instance, if you are using linear modulation scheme, PSK or PAM or something, and B1, B2 up to Bm are the points in your constellation. For instance, if it is QPSK, you have 4 points. I label them as B1, B2, B3 and B4. So you have 4 points. So now P of t is the pulse you use for modulation. So S1 of t is B1 times P of t, S2 of t is B2 times P of t. So basically the ith waveform is nothing but the ith symbol Bi multiplied by the corresponding pulse. So you have m possibilities for your symbol. So you have m such waveforms, right? So this is the general set of waveforms. So it can represent any particular PSK or QAM, right? So similarly, you can also use the same idea for FSK. So you have F1, F2 up to Fm be the distinct frequencies to represent each value of the symbol. So if you have 4 FSK, we will have 4 frequencies up to F3, F4. So for ease of computation, I allow them to be complex, right? So just like we allow the B of n to be complex, the symbols can be complex numbers. We can also allow the frequencies to be complex exponentials. So S1 of t is e power j 2 pi f1t, S2 of t is e power j 2 pi f2t, and so on. So you have m such frequencies. So each signal corresponds to a corresponding frequency multiplied by some pulse. That pulse might be something like a rectangular pulse, which will do the band limited, which will restrict your cosine waveform to finite time duration of t seconds. Okay, so now you have these m waveforms. Okay, so it can be, as I said, this is a more general treatment we have. So we have S1 of t, S2 of t up to Sm of t to represent m possible values of symbol. Now I can define the energy of the symbol, right? So E1 is the energy I spend in sending the first symbol. So for instance, energy is nothing but integrating the waveform square, right? So E1 is integral S1 of t square, E2 is integral S2 of t square, and so on. So these are the energies I am sending to send each waveform corresponding to a particular value of the symbol. Now the average energy is basically average value of these E1, E2, Em, which is I sum all these values and divide by m. Okay, so that is average symbol energy, which I call it as Es. Now I am going to define an important quantity called energy per bit. Okay, so this is the energy I am spending in 1 bit. Okay, so the Es is the energy I am spending to send one symbol, average energy to spend to send one symbol. Now average energy to send 1 bit is basically Es by log m, because each symbol has now log m bits. So you are sending so you are spending an energy of Es to send a symbol, but since a symbol has log m bits, so the energy you spend to send 1 bit is basically Es by log m. So this is called EB, energy per bit. And also we saw that the distance between the symbols, okay, is the one which governs the error performance. So just like QPSK, or just like the BPSK scheme I explained, right? So the distance between the points in your constellation tells you how much error performance you will get. Okay, so that is why it is important to define the distances. So I can actually define the distances using signals itself. Okay, so let's say Sk of t is the waveform corresponding to kth symbol, and Sl of t is the waveform for lth symbol value L. So now I take the difference between them, Sk of t minus Sl of t, take the square and then integrate it and take the square root. Okay, so this is basically like, you can think of it as a way to measure the distance between signals. Okay, so if Sk and Sl are very closely aligned, then the distance will be small. So that is captured through this particular formula. So what you have to do is take the difference between the two signals, square it and then integrate it and take the square root. So this is basically the distance. Now the minimum distance between the signals is basically, so you have m signals, you have all the pairs, you can take all the pairs of signals possible and find the, so each pair will have a distance. So S1 and S2 will have a distance, S1 and S3 will have a distance. You take all these distances and find the minimum. So minimum of the distances between the signals is called the d-min. So this is the minimum signals, and that is what will govern your performance. So some signals may be far apart, but some signals may be close. So the close ones are the ones which will cause more errors. Okay, so the minimum distance between the signals is one which will affect your performance. Okay, so now we are in a position to define what is called efficiency, power efficiency of a modulation scheme. So the power efficiency is defined as the distance square, the minimum distance square divided by EB, energy per bit. So for instance, so normalized by the energy per bit. So you want actually the distance between the signals to be as large as possible. Okay, but at the same time you are normalizing by the energy. So you can't keep on increasing the energy and then increasing the distance. So the ratio between the distance and the energy, average energy per bit, is called the efficiency. How efficient your scheme is with respect to using power. Okay, so when you are spending some power, you are actually spending some energy, right? And then at the same time, what is the minimum distance between the signals I am getting? Okay, so when I am spending this much energy, I also want certain minimum distance, right? So this ratio between the distance to the energy is called the power efficiency of the scheme. Okay, and then the bandwidth efficiency of the scheme is basically how much bitrate I can support using that scheme divided by the bandwidth occupied by that scheme. So this is called power bandwidth efficiency. So bitrate divided by bandwidth is basically bandwidth efficiency, and distance, minimum distance square divided by energy per bit is called the power efficiency. Okay, so now we are going to use these formulas and apply those formulas to compute the efficiency of PSK schemes, QAM schemes and FSK schemes. Okay, so let us use these formulas to compute the efficiency of various schemes we saw and understand which is efficient in terms of what. Okay, so let us do that. So again, when we talk about power and bandwidth, so we have to talk about some pulse which is common to everything, right? So the pulse P of t we are using in modulation, it appears both in linear as well as non-linear modulation. So we are assuming, so we have to take a common pulse which you can use for comparison, right? So let us take the pulse P of t with unit energy. So let us say assume that the pulse we have takes unit energy as well as it takes a minimum bandwidth needed for Nyquist criterion. So if you are sending a symbol rate of 1 by t, the minimum bandwidth you need is 1 by t. So let us say the pulse takes unit energy and also occupies the minimum bandwidth, so that everything is compared in a fair manner. Okay, so we don't want to change the pulse for different schemes, right? So we assume that the pulse has unit energy and also it occupies the minimum bandwidth satisfying the Nyquist criterion, which is 1 by t, which is basically the symbol rate. Okay. So assuming that the pulse satisfies this, now we can compare the efficiency of both PSK, PAM, QAM and also FSK. Okay. Compute the power efficiency. Okay, first let us say d main square by EB. So let us say we compare that for our linear modulation. So linear modulation means, so the ith waveform is of the form Bi times P of t. So the energy Ei is nothing but integral bi square times p square of t dt. So bi is basically comes outside the integral, and since p of t has unit energy, so the energy sending in ith symbol is nothing but magnitude square of the ith constellation point. Okay. So now the average energy is nothing but sum of magnitude square of all the constellation points divided by m. Okay. So if it is BPSK, the points are 1 and -1. So the magnitude square of, they have both have unit magnitude. So when you find the average will still be 1. Okay. So the average energy, symbol energy is 1. Now the average bit energy, right? So the symbol energy divided by is basically average energy per bit. For BPSK it is again 1. Okay. So because when you have BPSK sends only 1 bit per symbol, right? So in this case the bit energy and symbol energy are the same, but when you are using QPSK and QAM, the bit energy and the symbol energy are different. Okay. Now you can find the distances between the constellation or the signals as this way. So Sk of t is Bk times P of t and Sl of t is Bl times P of t. Take the distance. So this is basically Bk minus Bl square. Okay, so distance is Bk minus Bl magnitude square. Okay, Bk and Bl are the constellation point corresponding to K and L. Okay, and minimum distance is the distance Bk minus Bl whole square. Okay, so the minimum possible, the closest constellation point. So you find the point which is closest to the each other, right? So I mean that will give you the minimum distance. Okay, and then so now the power efficiency is the power efficiency is d min square by the average energy per symbol, right? So yeah, so average energy symbol is this and EB is this. So basically when I substitute it, this is what I get for power efficiency. So let me calculate the power efficiency for QPSK. So the QPSK, there are 4 points. Okay, so -1 plus j, 1 minus j, and so on and so forth, right? So now the minimum distances between the adjacent points. Okay, so 1 plus j and 1 minus j, the distance is basically 2, right? So the d min is 2, and energy I am spending in sending the symbols, all the points have the same energy, which is 2. So the energy per bit will be 1. So the energy per bit is 1 because I am sending 2 bits per symbol. So ES is 2, EB is 1, D min is 2. So for QPSK, the power efficiency is 4. Okay. On the other hand, I can compute the 16 QAM also. So 16 QAM D min again is 2 because if you have 1 plus j and 1 plus 3j, the distance between them is 2. So these two are the closest points, right? So the minimum distance is 2 here. You can actually find the average symbol energy and average bit energy and then we will see that the power efficiency is 8 by 5. While QPSK has power efficiency 4, the QAM, 16 QAM has power efficiency 8 by 5, and in general when you increase the size of the constellation, if you use 64 QAM and 256 QAM, the power efficiency actually decreases because you are putting more and more points in the constellation. Okay, so for instance, you are putting more and more points in the constellation, so the minimum distance actually keeps decreasing. While when you keep the symbol energy same, so you want to keep the average symbol energy constant across all these different constellations. So when you keep that same, when you put more points in the constellation, they get closer and closer. Okay, so that is why the power efficiency of 16 QAM, 64 QAM will be worse than 16 QAM, and so on. So as m increases, the power efficiency of QAM constellations decreases. In general, any QPSK is a special case of QAM, right? So while so essentially it means that you need to spend a lot more power if you increase the constellation size to get the same error performance. So that is what it means. So suppose I am sending 16 QAM, I spend this much energy to get this much error performance. But now if I change to 64 QAM, to get the same error performance, I have to spend a lot more power. Okay, because the power efficiency of the constellation is coming down. To meet the same error performance, I will be spending a lot more power. So on the other hand, let us look at the bandwidth efficiency. So all the symbols S1 of t, S2 of t and so on, they are multiplied by the same pulse, right? So the bandwidth the signals occupy is 1 by t. So the symbol rate is 1 by t. Bit rate is log m by t because each symbol conveys log m bits. So the bit rate divided by the bandwidth is basically log m. So the bandwidth efficiency is simply the bit rate divided by the bandwidth. The bandwidth is 1 by t. So the bandwidth efficiency is log m. So it means that as m increases, the bandwidth efficiency of QAM increases. So it means that without increasing the bandwidth, you are able to send more bits. That is what QAM is doing actually. So if you are using mQAM, you are actually sending log m bits, but all of these occupy the same bandwidth of 1 by t. So basically by increasing the constellation size, the bandwidth doesn't increase, the bandwidth is remaining the same 1 by t, but you are able to send more bits, right? So that is why bandwidth efficiency of the QAM is better when you increase m. So when you have small bandwidth, large power, QAM is better, okay, because QAM is poorer in terms of power efficiency, but in terms of good in terms of bandwidth efficiency. So when you have small bandwidth but large amount of power, then you will be using QAM. So for instance, cell phones, they use QAM constellations, okay, they don't use FSK. So they use QAM because the cell phones have very limited band, okay, but on the other hand, they can transmit at high power. So cell phones use QAM constellations, okay. Now let us go and see what FSK is doing. So let us see what frequency shift keying does, okay, so in terms of power efficiency and bandwidth efficiency. Of course, we choose orthogonal frequencies so that you can differentiate these frequencies over a symbol duration of t seconds, okay. So now, so Sk of t is e power j 2 pi f k t times pulse, and we want orthogonality, and so we said that if they all have the same phase, the spacing has to be 1 by 2t. If they have phases, the orthogonality requirement says the spacing has to be 1 by t, okay. So essentially it means when you change size of m, you are actually asking for more and more bandwidth because the spacing between the frequencies is 1 by t. So if you have two frequencies, you will be occupying a bandwidth of 2 by t. If you have 10 such frequencies, you will be occupying a bandwidth of 10 by t, right, because the spacing is 1 by t. So now let's first compute the power efficiency, just like we did for QAM. Let us do the power efficiency computation for FSK. So again we compute the average energy. So again e power j 2 pi f k t all have the same energy. So if you take the absolute value, it is 1, right? So when I integrate it, it becomes like 1, right? Mod e power j k. So it essentially becomes the energy of the pulse because e power j 2 pi f k has unit magnitude. Multiplying the pulse doesn't change the energy of the pulse. So energy is remaining the same. So the average symbol energy is 1 because each symbol has energy of 1. So the average symbol energy is 1, and average bit energy is 1 by log m because each symbol carries log m bits. Now let us look at the power efficiency, the distance between the signals. So again modulus of Sk of t minus Sl of t square. So magnitude square, I can write it as Sk minus Sl times Sk minus Sl conjugate. So that is magnitude square, right? So this is Sk minus Sl times Sk minus Sl conjugate. So there will be 4 terms, Sk square, Sl square, and then there will be cross terms Sk times Sl and Sl times Sk. But those cross terms are 0 because we have the frequencies chosen so that they are orthogonal. Because of the orthogonality, so the cross terms Sk and Sl integral is 0. So what you have is now energy of signal Sk plus energy of signal Sl, but they have unit energy. So the distance between the signals is 2. Okay, so 1 plus 1 minus 0, so it is 2. So all the signals have the same distance of 2. Okay, so all the signals also have the same energy of 1. So if I take the, oh, this is d min square, okay, because so dk square is basically square root of the distance. I have to take the square root, but I haven't taken the square root, so this is distance square, right? So the distance square is 2. So d min square is 2, and if I look at the power efficiency, it is d min square by Eb, but Eb is 1 by log m. So when I divide 2 divided by 1 by log m, it will becomes 2 log m. So power efficiency actually improves with m. So when you have orthogonal frequency shift keying, it is actually more and more power efficient if you have more and more orthogonal frequencies. So it means that it is efficiently using the power. Okay, so on the other hand, let us look at how the bandwidth efficiency looks like for FSK. So some symbol rate is 1 by t. You have m frequencies with spacing of 1 by 2t or 1 by t, depending on whether you have coherent or non-coherent orthogonality. So the bandwidth is m by 2t or m by t. Now bit rate is log m by t, right? Because symbol rate is 1 by t, you have log m bits. So bit rate is log m by t. Now you divide the bit rate by bandwidth. So bit rate by bandwidth is, for the coherent case, it will be 2 times log m by m, while for the non-coherent case, it is log m by m. Okay. So this is the bandwidth efficiency for coherent orthogonality, while so for each case we have the bandwidth efficiency, right? So nevertheless, as m increases, the bandwidth efficiency goes down. Okay, so for FSK, as you increase the size of the constellation, or as you increase more and more frequencies, they are lesser and lesser efficient in terms of using bandwidth, because it is clearly understandable. So you put a spacing constraint on these frequencies. So when you put more and more frequencies, so the total bandwidth you will be occupying is more and more, right? So FSK is actually not efficient in terms of using this bandwidth, but it is efficient in terms of using power. So when you have very small amount of power but large amount of bandwidth for communication, then you can use something called, you can use this FSK. Okay. So for instance, deep space communications, when you are sending signals to Mars or and so on. So when in satellites and so on. So there, the power you have is very small, because the signal has to travel a large amount of time, and when you receive the signal, it will have very small amount of power. But on the other hand, you have a large amount of bandwidth available to you, right? Meaning because nobody else is sending any signals to Mars, right? So there is a lot of bandwidth available to you when you are sending signals to Mars. So in that case, you can use FSK. So when you have large bandwidth available but very small power, FSK is better. On the other hand, when you have small amount of power but small amount of bandwidth but large amount of power, then you can use QAM. So that is why cell phones use QAM, while deep space communication you use FSK type of techniques. Okay, so that is the important concluding remarks. That is what I have said here also. Okay, so to summarize, we have seen various modulation techniques: linear, non-linear and differential. So each has application in certain places. Okay, so QAM is applicable when you have high frequency, high amount of power but small amount of bandwidth, and also high accurate oscillators. So you don't want phase errors, right? High accurate oscillators, you will use QAM. On the other hand, when you have small amount of power but large amount of bandwidth, you can use FSK. And differential phase shift keying is useful when you have phase mismatch between receiver, and when you have a very low cost oscillators which drifts a lot, and there is a lot of phase offset coming in, you can use differential phase shift keying. And even FSK to some extent is robust to phase offset. So when you are actually, so that point I didn't mention earlier, but now is a good time. So both FSK and differential PSK, both are robust to phase errors. Okay, so even FSK is robust to phase errors, while QAM is very sensitive to phase errors. Okay, but it is very bandwidth efficient. Okay, and it is power inefficient in the sense when you are increasing the size of the constellation, you have to spend lot more power to get the desired error performance. Okay, so I think with this I conclude this topic of baseband communication. So I'll take up the questions now, and then yes, differential BSK is modulation with memory. Okay, so it has memory because what you send is depends not only on the present one but also on the previous ones, right? So while decoding also, you not only look at the current output but also look at the previous output and compare the phase difference. So differential PSK has modulation with memory. Again, one question is which is preferred implementation, BPSK or differential BPSK? Again, as I said, when you have a low cost oscillator which can have where the phase errors are quite significant, you should use differential BPSK. On the other hand, when you have phase oscillator where phase errors are not that high, you can use BPSK. Okay, so that is the idea. And another question is why should we assume zero mean for Gaussian noise? Okay, so that is an interesting question. See, the thing is when you measure the noise across a voltage, I mean suppose you measure the voltage in your across a plug point, it is going to go up and down. I mean, ideally you should have 220 volts as coming in, but sometimes it goes higher, sometimes it goes lower, and so on. So there is always some fluctuations, right? But in most of the systems we encounter, the noise goes to both positive sides and negative sides. Okay, so sometimes it is on the positive side, sometimes on the negative side, so that on the average the DC value of on the average the noise will be, the average is 0. Okay, so it sometimes goes plus and sometimes goes minus, so that the mean value is 0. So that is a very typical assumption we make in any type of noise. Most of the models for noise assume 0 mean because it is true also in practice, because noise goes both positive and negative, so that the average is 0. Okay. So that is a very common model for noise with 0 mean. Okay, so one question is, phase and frequency are related. If phase difference is coded, what happens to frequency? No, phase and frequency are not the same thing. So when you have a cosine waveform, it has an explicit thing called frequency and there is an explicit thing called phase. They are not the same. When we encode the information in the phase, we are actually assuming that the frequency is not changing. Okay, so whenever you are talking about linear modulation, even the differential PSK is a linear modulation. Okay, so differential PSK is also a linear modulation. So whenever you have a linear modulation, the frequency will not change. So you only either change the amplitude or phase. Okay, so the frequency is not going to change. So even with differential PSK, the phase changes in a differential manner, but the frequency is not changing. So the frequency of the schemes of the waveforms will not change even for differential PSK. Okay, so PSK you won't change the frequency. Okay. So why PCM and DM are called modulation where we do not use any high frequency RF signals as we do in ASK, FSK, etc. See, I don't know why PCM is called pulse code modulation because it is not even for communication. Okay, so it is for source coding. Okay, so it is a way to convert a voice signal into bits. Okay, so PCM is that. I don't know why it is called modulation. Okay, so it is actually a source coding technique. So one question is, PLC communication that uses FSK, does the efficiency remain same? I don't understand exactly what you mean by efficiency remains the same. PLC, I understand that it is a power line communication. So I don't know. So yeah, whenever you use an FSK type of scheme, the efficiency computations we did have some relevance. Okay, so yeah, I think the efficiency computations are somewhat straightforward. So I don't think just because it is PLC, the efficiency will change. Only thing is, because the noise and interference are there, so the performance might be affected based on the interference and so on and so forth. Okay, so the minimum distance between the signals, it may not be accurately capturing all the phenomena that can happen in PLC. Okay, so for instance, the model we use to compute the efficiency, right, the d mean square by energy per bit, that is useful when you have an additive white Gaussian noise model. But if the noise changes and distortions are, some other distortions are coming in, so the metric you should be using is slightly different. So that depends on the model of the noise you have. Okay, so for Gaussian noise model, this power efficiency can be computed using d mean square by EB. Okay. So is it possible to maintain orthogonality of signals? Okay, so maintain in the sense, what exactly is the meaning of maintaining? So when you take a sine waveform or a cosine waveform, which is two different cosine signals with frequency separated by 1 by t, they will be orthogonal. So I don't understand why do you have to maintain orthogonality of signals. Okay, so again, when it goes to the medium, things get distorted and so on. So the waveforms get distorted. So after distortion, whether they will remain orthogonal or not depends on the type of distortion. Okay, so but I think that is probably your question. So when they get distorted, will they still remain orthogonal? So that depends on the type of distortion. Okay, so if it is simply delaying and amplitude scaling, the orthogonality is not affected. Okay, so but there are some nonlinear distortions. If they happen, then orthogonality will be affected. So even though we have two carrier choices, sine and cosine, why most of the analysis is done using cosine? No, actually we use both. If I go back to the previous notes, so when I'm talking about complex symbols, right? I'm talking about QPSK, BPSK, and so on. Sorry, QPSK, QAM, and so on. I use both carriers, right? So eventually, so it is not only sine carrier. For instance, yeah. So this, if I look at this, right? I use both carriers for my modulation. So when I'm using QPSK, I'm actually using both sine and cosine carriers. So when we are writing books, maybe when we are using only one carrier, they write it as cosine. But there is nothing special about cosine. Sine is also nearly it's the same, except that there is a phase shift between sine and cosine, right? So when we write in books, we are writing it as cosine, but technically when we are using QPSK, we are using both sine and cosine carriers. But I don't see any reason why sine or cosine one is better than the other. There is no such thing. But when we write in books, we always use cosine waveform. But I think that is just for convenience and notation. Okay, so sine is equally good. Okay, why FSK is a nonlinear modulation? Because the information bit actually changes the frequency of the carrier. Okay, so while PSK and amplitude shift keying or QAM, they change the amplitude and phase of the carrier. So when you change an amplitude and phase, it is a linear system. Okay, so when you pass a carrier and the system changes the amplitude and phase, that is a linear system. In fact, it is a linear time invariant system. But on the other hand, when you have a carrier and the system changes its frequency, that is a nonlinear system, right? So you can think of modulation is like an operation which takes the carrier and does some processing on the carrier and changes its amplitude or phase or frequency. So when you change amplitude and frequency, amplitude and phase, it is a linear operation, while changing the frequency is a nonlinear operation. So that is why we call it as nonlinear modulation. Okay, yeah. So I think that is pretty much it. Okay, all right. Thank you for participating. Hope the materials were useful and accessible. Okay, all right. Thank you all.